Welcome to Dialogue. Today's topic is part of an extensive series on the modern dating crisis. So today, we're doing a really crucial deep dive. We're trying to understand how the whole space of dating became this zone where people can operate with almost no external oversight, no accountability.
Right.
And we really want to measure the relational costs of that shift. Our mission here is structural.
Yeah.
We're not here to blame individuals, but to figure out how the actual architecture of accountability got dismantled.
That framing, the architecture is so important.
What kind of behaviors, rushed in to fill that void?
It's critical because when we look at the issues people are facing today, it's so easy to jump to psychology or personality traits. He's a narcissist or she's avoidant.
Sure, the individual labels.
Exactly. But the engine driving this crisis is structural. We've moved from a system where relational decisions were a community affair
Right.
to one where they are completely individualized, they're hidden, they're self-managed, and accountability in that old context was just this implicit understanding that your actions,
The things you do to another person.
yes, especially those things impacting their time, their dignity, their heart, all of that would be observed. It would be recorded and probably judged by a network much larger than just the two of you.
So we're really analyzing how the foundation of that support system just broke down.
And in doing so, allowed bad behavior to become essentially consequence-free behavior.
Okay, so let's set out our path for this. We're going to start by painting a pretty detailed picture of that traditional safety net. What did that filtering and guidance mechanism from the community actually look like? From there, we'll get to the pivot point. We'll identify the modern shifts, mobility, technology, isolation that took those supports away.
The things that knock the legs out from under the table.
Exactly. And finally, we'll take a really forensic look at the specific low accountability behaviors that are flourishing in this new vacuum. And that'll lead us to a discussion about this profound lowering of the minimum acceptable standard for how we treat each other.
Yeah.
So I want to start by setting up this contrast, the atmosphere of finding a partner then versus now. Just for a second, forget the digital free-for-all we have today.
Okay.
Instead, imagine you're searching for a really sensitive role, a partnership, but it's within a tiny, close-knit industry. The hiring pool is small, and every single candidate has this long, well-known resume that goes back for decades.
Right. Everyone knows everyone's history.
That's what dating used to be like.
Yeah.
So when it wasn't done in total isolation, what was the community's primary job? What was its essential function?
Its primary function was filtering, plain and simple. The community acted as this robust, organic firewall.
A firewall.
A firewall against deeply unsuitable matches. See, when you lived in a place where your life was spatially integrated, your home, your work, your family, your social life, all in the same area, you were operating inside a shared boundary.
So potential partners weren't just random people.
They were known entities, or at the very least, they were entities that could be vetted almost instantly through just a few degrees of separation.
So let's get concrete on that. What were the mechanisms of that filter? How did that data actually get collected?
It wasn't just, your parents giving you some advice. It was active, continuous surveillance. In a good way.
Surveillance sounds a little intense.
It does, but think of it as ambient awareness. Your neighbors saw how a potential suitor handled his morning chores, or if he was kind to the local kids. People at church saw how they treated their elders.
The small things.
The small, telling things. The shopkeepers observed their honesty, their patience. All of this built a long-term behavioral track record. So families, neighbors, friends, they could instantly tell you, yes, this person is financially stable, they're kind to their siblings, but be careful, they have a short fuse when they get stressed.
And that is the key distinction. That is what's been lost. The vetting was based on character that was observed over a lifetime, not performance curated over a week.
That's beautifully put. Performance versus character.
Today, what do we rely on? A perfectly lit profile picture, 5 carefully chosen anecdotes, and a history that's completely self-reported. We are assessing performance art.
Absolutely.
Back then, the filter was observing how someone treated people they had zero incentive to impress. The waiter, the janitor, their own little brother. That long-term observation gave you a character reference that just vanishes when you meet someone cold online.
You've replaced, 20 years of communal observation?
With 20 minutes of small talk on a first date.
Yeah.
And we wonder why it's so hard.
And this established an incredibly high barrier to entry for any kind of deception. If you tried to misrepresent your wealth or your intentions or your family background,
that lie would unravel so fast.
instantly.
Yeah.
because your potential partner's network was already cross-referencing your claims against what they had seen with their own eyes for years. The community literally held the dossier on you. It was almost impossible to maintain a false narrative for long.
So beyond just filtering out bad actors, the community also served as a guide, right? It provided structure.
Yes, a structure that dramatically reduced ambiguity. We're talking about established norms and rituals for courtship.
Things we just don't have anymore.
Not really. There were clear, culturally endorsed timelines. You had expectations for how often you should see each other, the point at which you were expected to introduce them to the family.
The appropriate time for an engagement, for marriage.
All of it. And this structure was functionally critical. It basically eliminated the modern situationship.
Because there were clear expectations for investment.
Precisely. If someone wasn't willing to follow that publicly known, socially approved timeline, their intentions were immediately suspect. They risked being excluded from the social market altogether.
And that guidance leads right into relational accountability. This seems like the central pillar of that old system.
It was everything.
So if you behaved poorly, let's
Yeah.
say you were unfaithful, or you ended an engagement in a really callous way, or you were just known for being deceitful,
That behavior didn't just exist in the privacy of your relationship.
it became public knowledge.
Exactly. And that knowledge had real-world consequences.
Mm.
Economic, social. Your reputation preceded you everywhere you went.
So there was a real cost to being a jerk.
A huge cost. The mechanism was ruthless, but it was incredibly effective. The community imposed a social cost on bad behavior that often completely outweighed whatever fleeting gain you got from that behavior.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. Let's say you mistreated partner A. Well, partner A's family or friends or even just neighbors might quietly warn partner B or partner C who comes along later.
So your dating pool actually shrinks.
It shrinks dramatically. Your social resume is tainted. The fear of social exclusion, of not being able to find a suitable partner at all, that was a much more powerful regulator of conduct than any one person's individual conscience.
Wow.
So to synthesize all that, the traditional system made sure that the cost of being unethical or manipulative was just prohibitively high.
You might get away with it once.
You might deceive one person temporarily, but the collective social network would find out, and that information would cascade through the entire community. So to even navigate that social market and secure a partnership, people were functionally compelled to stick to a high minimum standard of respect and integrity.
So the community was regulating the market.
It was regulating the market toward ethical behavior, and it was using reputation as its currency.
That system sounds like it had these incredible built-in checks and balances. So what happened? What specific supports are removed that caused this whole architecture to just collapse?
Yeah.
If that communal vetting was the structure holding everything up, how did we shift so completely to this individual, isolated way of making decisions?
The collapse was really driven by two massive modern forces. First, hypermobility, and second, the rise of platform technology.
Okay, let's unpack mobility first.
We just don't live, work, and socialize in those tight, integrated spheres anymore. The professional workforce is transient. People move cities for jobs. They change apartments every couple of years.
We choose partners who might be from hundreds of miles away from our family or our hometown.
Exactly. And the consequence of that is that the modern individual is choosing partners in complete and total isolation. Technology comes in and just supercharges that. It introduces us to people who are total strangers to our entire established social ecosystem.
And that phenomenon, dating completely outside your own networks, that seems to be the single most corrosive factor here.
I think it is. A relationship starts online, and both people are basically tourists in each other's lives. They meet, they date, maybe they even move in together.
And this whole journey can happen before their closest friends or family even know the partner's last name.
Let alone anything about their history, their family, their reputation. The relationship is entirely compartmentalized. It exists in its own little silo.
And why is that silo so devastating for accountability?
Because when a partner has zero connection to your established network, your college friends, your work colleagues, your family, they have absolutely no incentive to maintain a positive, long-term standing in your life beyond that immediate interaction.
They're not invested in your ecosystem.
Not at all. They can treat you with complete disregard, they can ghost you, they can be deceptive, and the only person who suffers the fallout is you. The only witness is you.
So they face no social repercussions back in their own world.
None, because
Honest-
your world and their world don't overlap. There's no bridge between them.
This isolation also seems to create this psychological tendency to hide our dating lives.
Mm.
It starts subtly. I mean, contrast the expectation of the past, where you'd pretty quickly have a potential partner vetted by your family, with the modern secrecy that's so common now. People won't tell their friends who they're seeing. They keep the relationship completely offline.
Especially in those early stages, it's often framed as a form of self-protection, you know? I don't want external judgment. I just want to see where this goes.
Right, I want my friends getting in my head about it.
But what it actually creates is this deliberate, destructive vacuum of oversight. By maintaining that secrecy, you actively remove the possibility of external influence, objective feedback, or of necessary intervention.
So your friends can't warn you about a red flag that they see.
They can't. They can't cross-reference a story that sounds a little inconsistent. And maybe most importantly, they can't look at that questionable partner and say, hey, your behavior is not okay and we see you.
So the secrecy just accelerates the very problem you're trying to solve. You're trying to fight a war against low standards, but you're doing it in complete darkness.
Yes, and this brings us right to the critical factor, the death of social consequences.
Because the relationship exists in that silo.
It's contained within the dyad, just the pair. In the past, mistreating a partner meant immediate reputational damage that would impact all your future opportunities.
Today, a person can systematically treat 10 people in a row with zero respect, lying, manipulating, using, discarding them, and their very next date will show up with a completely clean slate.
Totally unaware of the trail of emotional destruction left behind.
So the cost of relational failure is now effectively zero, or close to it.
It's perfectly compartmentalized. If a relationship ends badly because you were dishonest, you don't have to face your neighbors or your colleagues or your family with that shame.
You just delete the app.
You delete the app, maybe take a short break, and then you log right back onto a fresh, infinite pool of strangers. Your reputation among the dating public remains pristine because there's no mechanism for shared negative reviews. There's no collective memory.
And that has to alter the fundamental risk-reward calculation for how people behave.
Completely. If the cost of being ethical includes some inconvenience like having a tough, honest conversation.
Which nobody likes to have.
Right. But the risk of being unethical, like just ghosting someone, is totally eliminated. The calculation is always going to favor self-interest. It's simple logic. Why would I prioritize integrity when convenience and immediate gratification come at zero reputational cost?
And it's that structural reality, not just individual morality, that's allowed this whole inventory of low accountability behaviors to become standard practice.
It's not just standard. For many people, it's expected.
Okay, so this is where we take that theoretical framework and look at the real-world consequences. What specific actions, things that were just unthinkable before because of the high social cost, now flourish in this low accountability world?
Right.
I mean, we've developed a whole new vocabulary for these modern, often cruel behaviors.
We have, and we have to start with instant disappearance because it's really the cornerstone of zero consequence dating, ghosting.
A classic.
It's the act of ending a relationship, and it doesn't matter if it was 2 dates or 2 months, by simply vanishing, providing zero explanation, zero courtesy, zero closure. It is the ultimate expression of relational isolation.
So let's connect the dots. Why is ghosting so structurally dependent on isolation?
Because if the person you ghosted were actually integrated into your life in any meaningful way, if they were friends with your roommate or a client at your work or your best friend's cousin,
Ghosting would be socially impossible, or at least incredibly awkward.
it would be socially unsustainable. You would have to face that shared network. The pressure to maintain just a basic courtesy, to send a simple text saying, hey, this isn't working for me, would be immense.
But when you meet someone from a totally different social universe,
You can vanish, and you never have to fear facing them or anyone in their network ever again. That lack of closure that people find so painful is a direct byproduct of the ghoster's certainty that they face zero collective judgment for their cowardice.
and it seems like hand in hand with that immediate exit is just chronic dishonesty.
Yes. When there's no way to cross-reference reputations or stories, deception becomes easy. It becomes routine, and it's virtually untraceable.
And we're not talking about little white lies here.
No, not that sure it looks great on you. We're talking about fundamental lies. Lies about your relationship status, your availability for commitment, your financial stability, your past behavior.
Think about the logistics of it. It's so simple now.
It is. If you tell a date you broke up with your ex 6 months ago and your date happens to know your ex's cousin, that information might get challenged.
Right. The network fact-checks you.
But if you met on an app and you live in different parts of the city, you can maintain a completely false narrative about your availability. You can lie about being single when you're actually dating 3 other people, or, hiding a whole significant other entirely.
So in the absence of those shared social networks, the default just becomes, I'm going to say whatever is most convenient for my immediate goal.
And that places the entire burden of verification of detection onto the isolated partner. This corrosion is systemic. It poisons the well of trust before a relationship can even get started.
Then we see the rise of these emotional management tactics. Things designed purely to maintain access without any real commitment. The big one being breadcrumbing.
Breadcrumbing. It's a perfect term for it. You're offering these tantalizing, sporadic bursts of attention.
A late-night text, a random, like on an old Instagram post.
An ambiguous, flirty message. Just enough to keep the other person hooked. Keep them interested and accessible, but it never requires the breadcrumber to invest any genuine time or energy.
And this behavior is so manipulative because it specifically exploits the recipient's isolation.
It thrives on it. If the person getting the breadcrumbs had a close, objective feedback loop trusted friends who could see the pattern,
They would immediately get validation. Someone would say, that person only texts you at 11 p.m. on a Saturday and then goes dark all week. That is not genuine interest.
that is emotional maintenance. Stop engaging. But in isolation, the recipient internalizes all that ambiguity. They rationalize those tiny crumbs as proof of real interest. And it leads them into this long, drawn-out, non-committal cycle that benefits only the breadcrumber.
So the lack of external scrutiny means the manipulator can just keep doing this forever.
Indefinitely. It's a low-effort, high-impact tactic.
And this all just feeds into a more generalized emotional manipulation. When there are no external checks, the power imbalance dictates all the terms.
Exactly. One party can gaslight. They can dismiss valid concerns. They can impose totally unreasonable emotional demands.
And they're confident there's no trusted third party who's going to step in and say, wait a minute, that behavior is toxic.
Right. When relationships are hidden, abusive or manipulative patterns can escalate so much faster because the victim has no external benchmark. They have no idea what's healthy or acceptable. That unchecked power of the isolated individual leads to a total collapse of emotional ethics.
Let's talk about intimacy. Specifically, the transactional nature of it that's enabled by this isolation, disappearing immediately after intimacy.
This is a big one.
In a high accountability world, intimacy carried a relational contract. It was either implicit or explicit, but it was there. It was tied to commitment, or at the very least, to continued follow-up.
And that was enforced by the simple expectation of future interaction within the shared community. You knew you were going to see that person and their family and their friends again.
Now, when isolation is absolute, that emotional contract is just dissolved.
It's gone. The person who's only seeking a short-term physical transaction can get what they want, and then they can vanish without a trace. Because there is no shared space, no neighbor, no family member who will see or judge that callous act.
So they successfully reduce intimacy to a zero-cost transaction.
Completely ignoring the emotional vulnerability of the other person. The functional cost of abandonment is zero, so the incentive to maintain dignity or to follow up just vanishes. This outcome is a pure expression of a structural problem. It's isolation removing moral guardrails,
Finally, we have to look at the rise of these complex, secret double lives.
which were logistically almost impossible in the past.
Right. Those overlapping social circles were the ultimate enemy of deception.
You couldn't pull it off for long.
But now, technology and our transient lifestyles make it shockingly simple to maintain multiple, parallel relationships, with none of them being aware of the others.
The logistics are almost too easy. You can use compartmentalized apps, a work profile, a casual dating profile, a serious one. You can keep one relationship entirely confined to one neighborhood and another one confined to the city you travel to for work.
And since neither partner is integrated into your core social life, there are no overlapping calendars, no shared contacts.
No risk of that accidental discovery at the local grocery store.
So the deceiver is now empowered to maintain these entire, complicated, false narratives, false backstories, false timelines, even false future intentions, because there's literally no one there to check the receipts.
The removal of that communal safety net has made high-stakes, long-term deception an easily executable strategy. And it leads to these deep, catastrophic betrayals that were just so much harder to pull off when everyone, knew your business.
So if we add all this up, the aggregate of these isolated, low-consequence interactions, the ghosting, the breadcrumbing, the lies, The result is this systemic and really disturbing shift in our dating norms.
It is.
This isn't just a few bad apples anymore. This is a whole new landscape where basic courtesy has become optional.
The source material is very clear on this. The lack of relational accountability has profoundly lowered the floor of acceptable behavior.
Yeah.
We really need to understand what that means.
Okay, define that. The lowered floor.
Historically, in a high accountability system, the minimum floor, the bare, non-negotiable standard, was something like treat people with basic dignity, respect their time, and communicate your intentions clearly, even if it's uncomfortable.
And if you drop below that floor,
Any behavior below that floor would trigger social censure, potential exclusion. But the modern floor has dropped precipitously.
so what's the new floor?
The new functional standard is, as we've said, treat people however you wish as long as you don't face legal consequences.
That is a terrifyingly low bar.
It is. Actions like ghosting, emotional manipulation, deliberate ambiguity, they're no longer seen as these moral failings that deserve condemnation. They've been normalized. They're just part of dating. And that vast space between that new abysmal floor and the standard of genuinely ethical conduct has become this confusing, low-effort terrain where everyone is forced to operate.
And that normalization is maybe the most devastating outcome of all. When these low-effort, self-interested behaviors become so widespread and consequence-free, they shift from being unacceptable outliers
To just being expected obstacles.
and that fundamentally distorts our perception of what's normal. It forces anyone looking for a healthy connection to massively lower their emotional expectations just to survive the process.
Yes. Think about the burden that places on a modern single person. If you're out there seeking mutual respect and honesty, you are now operating against a backdrop of chronically low standards. The bar has been reset so low that baseline courtesy is often mistaken for heroic virtue.
Right, and we see that constantly.
The classic frustrating example is the celebration of a partner who just texts back consistently.
Just text back in a reasonable amount of time.
Yes. 30 years ago, that wasn't a virtue you celebrated. That was the assumed non-negotiable hygiene of communication.
Because the bare minimum.
It was. But now, because so many other people are prone to disappearing or leaving messages unread for days or giving these deliberately ambiguous responses, simple consistency becomes a major point of celebration. It's a sign that this individual is somehow exceptional and worthy of praise.
And that just shows you how far the floor has dropped. We're applauding behaviors that used to be the mandatory entry fee for interaction.
Exactly.
And this has to drive a self-perpetuating vicious cycle.
It does. As people are repeatedly treated poorly, they're ghosted, breadcrumbed, lied to, used, they naturally become defensive.
Of course, you build walls.
You become guarded, less trusting, less willing to invest emotionally. You might even start adopting some of these low accountability behaviors yourself as a protective mechanism.
The reasoning being, why should I treat this stranger with high ethical standards if everyone else is treating me like a disposable commodity?
Precisely. And that defensiveness and that disinvestment just perpetuate the low standards. It accelerates the dating crisis for absolutely everyone involved.
So the diagnosis seems clear. Isolation enables the problem.
It's the root of it. So the countermeasure has to be the reintroduction of accountability.
Which sounds hard.
It's difficult because it requires vulnerability, but it involves consciously bringing your dating life out of the shadows and back into the light of your community and your friendship networks.
We're not talking about, bringing every first date home to meet your parents.
No, of course not. But it's about utilizing your friends and family as an objective check and balance against manipulative or low-effort partners.
So what does that look like practically?
The goal is to raise the perceived social costs of unethical behavior. If you shared the details of a date with a trusted, objective friend, what was said, what was promised, what actually happened, and how you feel, you give them the data they need to provide real scrutiny.
So if someone breadcrumbs you,
Your friend can confirm, yes, that is manipulative, and you should probably stop responding. If someone disappears after intimacy, your friend can share in that collective judgment that this person acted without integrity.
so it's that willingness to subject your choices and your experiences to external supportive scrutiny.
That's the only mechanism we have left to force that floor of acceptable conduct to rise again. It means accepting feedback, even when it's uncomfortable, for the sake of your own long-term relational health.
So that brings us to the end of this deep dive. I think the core takeaway is simple, but it's really profound. Modern dating is so challenging, not because the inherent character of people has suddenly gotten worse.
Right. People haven't changed that much.
It's because the structural supports, the community oversight, that used to enforce basic relational ethics have dissolved. When the community stops watching, bad behavior becomes free behavior.
And that freedom is ultimately corrosive to everyone who is out there looking for a genuine, lasting connection.
So we have to move past just diagnosing the problem and get toward application.
We do. And for anyone listening, consider one specific, practical way you could consciously introduce a layer of external accountability into your relational life this week.
Something small.
It could be as simple as openly discussing your dating intentions and the character of the people you're seeing with one trusted, objective friend. Instead of keeping that entire process hidden, make your dating life a shared experience, not a secret one.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Also, let us know in the comments what really stood out to you in this conversation, and if there's any related topic or new topic that you would like covered in a future video.